Hi, I'm Vicky Ann, Director and Founder of Creative Recruiters. Welcome to the Creative Studio Insider podcast. My special guest this week is Bud Peart. Bud is the Creative Services Manager, Head of Creative and Head of Content Creation at Wellcom Worldwide. Thanks so much for joining me today, Bud.
Thanks for having me on, Vicky. It'd be great to talk.
Let me start by asking you to explain to those who may not know who Wellcom actually is.
Yeah, Wellcom's a bit of a discreet company in terms of how it operates. It's not a big bragger in terms of, like a big agency presence, but it is actually part of a really big agency group now. It's a content production agency, which differs a little bit from your standard creative agency or strategic agency, and it's very focused on output. But there's a big breadth of services to what we do. We were acquired by the InOcean Group in late 2019. So InOcean is a South Korean agency that's linked to Hyundai. So they acquired Wellcom in last year. So they've been obviously a pretty rocky road to that acquisition and sort of big change there. But it's all settling in and it's going well.
And what will be the benefits of the acquisition, do you think, for your business?
Yeah, I think the acquisition gives us just a much bigger global footprint than what we already had. We obviously had operations in New York and London and Kuala Lumpur, and there were growing operations in other places in Europe. But this really sort of cements that expansion, which is great for us to sort of work with a bigger agency group that's probably 5 or 6 times as many people, to work with them strategically across the globe to grow more offices and more creative production operations. So, which is exciting.
Exciting times. You've had a really interesting journey into your current role where you are today. Tell me a bit about your professional background and how those early roles, I guess, led to where you are today.
Yeah, obviously, I came from a design background. I was a graphic designer. I've always been a bit of a tech enthusiast as well, so it was quite a nice mixture to always work across. I've never really liked doing one particular thing for too long. It kind of bores me. So I started off as a graphic designer. I worked in the skateboarding industry originally, so I really liked that. And, in that role sort of was very fluid in terms of what it was. It was a bit of marketing, a bit of design, packing boxes, whatever else was a bit of PR work. It was very, small company. So we're having to wear many hats. And that was really nice. So I did that for several years, which was great. And then I kind of moved on to just more general design work for a lot of small businesses, really. But that also expanded out to freelancing and, working with some, Melbourne freelancing agencies and talent agencies. That was really a good chance to work across heaps of different businesses in sort of chaotic states and relaxed states, or, usually chaotic when you're freelancing. You can't help solve problems. So, but that was a great experience. At the same time, I sort of started doing a lot of web design and development. This is probably early 2000s with friends. So we had some clients in the States and, I was doing that outside of my normal work. So, work all day, then come back and jump on work at night. And did that for like years really, but it eventually became sort of too taxing on me. I think doing 14, 16-hour days is just unsustainable. So I eventually took a job with Kmart at that time, and that was it was about 13 years ago. So I worked with Kmart Group. That was great. Small little studio, just doing really, really basic stuff. What I was doing was mostly retouching, but that's okay. I kind of got very good at Photoshop as a result. But did that for several years, and then took a role with Wellcom, working on their Honda account, which was good, like running a little tiny studio for Honda motorcycles actually. Then moved to Ford and had several stints at Ford in different capacities, from designer, studio manager, and then off to BP.
I think back at Ford is where we may have met, when you're at Ford, or it might have been your transition to BP perhaps. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I did Ford, BP, then back to Ford. So I did move around there, which was really good. I kind of liked it was, I'm not a car enthusiast by any stretch of the imagination, but it was really interesting. It's such a complex sort of supply chain and an interesting world of vehicle production. So it was quite, an eye-opener in terms of how that kind of organisation ran. And BP was similar. It was just a really kind of big organisation with many facets to it. And then I eventually took a role as a creative services manager back at Wellcom, which was great. That came up and I put my hand up for it and, obviously wrote my own application for it internally.
Yeah.
And, somehow I got the job, which was great. And which was, at the time, it was only a very small division. It was probably focused on mostly like retouching, creative retouching. And that's what traditionally they had under their sort of creative services banner. But that's, that went from a team of, I don't know, I think we had about 4 people at that point. It was really small. So that expanded out. We eventually expanded the services that sat under that. So everything went from, we obviously built a digital team, which is something we didn't have at that point. So we took on digital services, web development, display banners. That's expanded out into like motion, visualization, capture, now strategy and ideation and experience. So it's a long pathway to get there, but we got about, almost 40 people in the team now under me across Australia. So that's been a really exciting change of seeing that grow over like the last 6 years, which has been good.
And I mean, your role, when I read out your job title, it sounds like it's 3 jobs in one, which is quite often the case for the pole creative services manager. What's the makeup of your team these days, and how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. And obviously, as a kind of new opportunity arises, you have to get talent and build for it, right? So that's sort of been the biggest, I think the biggest shift has probably been, when you stand up a digital team, originally it was like, okay, we just need developers and we need, some digital designers or whatever, but now that's kind of expanded out. So we now have like a strategist who focuses on user experience and, people who can assist with user experience testing and, development teams have to get more detailed in terms of that structure and the skill sets, and obviously more animators and more video designers and stuff like that. That's built a lot in terms of, there was very few people and it was very TV centric at one point, and now it's pretty much all social centric. So we have a lot of motion graphics artists and UI designers, normal general designers and art directors and stuff as well, copywriters and video teams and everything. So it's a really broad set of services, but it's designed for kind of like omni-channel campaign creation, where you might be doing everything from here's our landing page we're going to start with, and here's our email campaign that goes with it, here's our digital out of home campaign, here's our display banner campaign that goes with that, and then we need a social plan and the social execution. So it really has moved from, and I think it's data driven, right, from going from this sort of having a function that you sit in a chain of like an agency supplies something, then we execute it and do that. And it's just all disappeared now. The lines are just so blurred that they don't exist anymore. That's pretty much my view. It's like really because of the time constraints that you need to be able to respond quickly and change course with a campaign like overnight if it's not performing or something's not quite right, or they need to shift the media spend to change the channel mix of that campaign. It enables opportunity, but also means you have to have a lot of flexibility in that team structure and be able to bring in the right people and pull them back and move them out when required as well.
Typically, who are your clients? What industries do they come from?
We have a very mixed bag. Like Wellcom does have a lot of retail clients. So, Wellcom works with places like Kmart, Coles. Sure. We also have, clients in the financial area. So I work with like ANZ, Mercer, and then we also have, fashion clients like Fila and stuff like that as well. So it's a big mix. I wouldn't say there's, it enables for, not to get too bored because you're working on very different sets of services for these clients as well. Like,
And so what does a typical day look like for someone like you?
A lot of comms. That's probably the main thing, like heaps of communication, and it's pretty hard to predict. Obviously, like I have a calendar and that pretty much fills out really quickly, and then there's not many slots there. So obviously I've got teams in Sydney and teams in Melbourne, so we have to obviously communicate. I try to get everyone on Slack as much as possible, just because it's easier for me to not have to do face-to-face with everyone all the time. It's just that's really, really difficult.
And so Slack is your program of choice for that?
that's definitely one that for like informal internal communication. Yeah,
Mm.
that's what I kind of like. It's like, hey, I'm doing this today. I won't be available till 2 o'clock. Just chuck it there.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we use. Yeah, the tech. There's an interesting tech stack. We'll probably get to that in a sec. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like my day is very hard to predict. So it's half, I'd say, half pre-planned and half reactive. So which is interesting, but like as long as it's not 90% reactive, it's okay. But that's pretty much how it rolls.
And who tend to be your clients, your internal stakeholders, and how do their, differing priorities, or their conflicting priorities, how do you manage them?
Yeah, internally I work with obviously the CEO, business development team, sales representatives, department heads as well, whether
Yeah.
it's like photography or video or things like that. So it's a big range, and a lot of probably my energy is focused on business acquisition in a strange way. Like it's I do have a very kind of upfront role in talking to clients about their needs and then modeling services or solutions for that.
At what stage are you brought into that process, that business development process?
It can be from the RFP. Sometimes it's like obviously I work on the RFPs with the rest of the team, and then follow that through right through to delivery. So it's kind of, I prefer it to actually have that insights and understanding of what the business actually wants initially. So it does help us improve delivery and make sure we're just aligned to what our purpose is there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do find that the higher up the food chain I can get, the more useful it is in the long term.
I imagine that in a role as big as yours, choosing the right tools, the right platforms to keep track of projects, and the progress of those projects is a critical responsibility of yours. Over and above Slack, what tools are you using? Why did you choose them? And were there any challenges with their implementation?
So we've probably got like tools that we had pre-COVID and then tools that we got after COVID, right? So
Yeah.
I've been running Asana maybe for 5 or 6 years in terms of that's our day-to-day studio ops and task management, project management. So that works really well for just that visibility, right? In terms of who's on what, where, when, who's available to work on something. So that gives me a nice oversight. My skills on it aren't as good as what they were once upon a time. Obviously, I just look at things at a quite high level now. I just sort of see what activity we got. But I do love it. I do like the sort of fluid board structure where you can just use templates or just make up a process for a more complicated job. It's probably one of my favorite tools. Not that there's many things like it, right? You could jump on Trello or Monday, and you'll get a similar result. But it's just personal preference. I'm just used to it. So that's one. Then we've got for like files and everything else. Obviously, we've got Dropbox, which we just deployed. We're moving from like fixed servers just at the start of COVID, and we had to rapidly roll. We were starting our trial at the start of lockdown, and we had to move the whole business to Dropbox, which is pretty sort of insane. So that was actually really nice, or not nice at the time, but in retrospect, it was a nice challenge to sort of go, okay, this is how we navigate like a mass deployment as fast as possible. So that was really interesting, but that's been fantastic as well. That's enabled, working from home, working from anywhere really, and also consolidating that set of files. We at the same time we brought on a bit more process rigidity in terms of like this is how you should work, and this is how your folders should be structured. Everyone gets a bit native over time, right? So it was like bringing everyone back to a centralized process. So that's been good. In my other things for the tech stack, obviously we use Google Suite, right, for email and all the sort of Word-like functions, Office sort of functions. That's probably there. We use Meets, Google Meets. Again, that's just because it's but probably I've used every single video conferencing application around. Some other nice ones or interesting ones I've probably used a little bit more. Things like Miro, which is like a group whiteboard, really. But
I discovered Miro yesterday.
It's really nice. Again, there's like dozens of things like it, right? But it sort of just comes down to like, I don't think I want to learn every application. I'm just happy to just learn one. And obviously, like Adobe tools have been pretty crucial, and some of the new functions there coming in from Adobe, like CC libraries and stuff like that, have been kept us rolling. So that's really our tech stack at the moment. It's probably a little bit broad, and could do with some consolidation after this experience, but at the same time, it's been interesting to see how everyone adopts certain technology, regardless of age or computer literacy. They seem to be, embraced some technologies well, others not. And I think it's a lot to do with how approachable those technologies are and how well they're designed. And I think the ones that are designed and they're intuitive, anyone can pick it up and they can start to use it. And that's how I usually try to benchmark it. How intuitive is this product for us to use? I've always figured, like, if I can give it to my mum and she can work it out, that's probably where we need to be.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, you don't want to create barriers to that stuff. I think it's the worst thing you can do with technology is make it difficult to use or make it alienating. It's bad. So yeah, that's our current tech stack. It'll probably alter and flex a bit.
Yeah, and do you think that you'll be keeping a lot of that even as you transition the team back into the office?
Yeah, I would say so. Because at the same time, I took over control of the Sydney creative arm as well. So we now have a location separated team, right? So we have to keep these things in place. So it's likely that we're going to keep rolling with Miro and all these things going forward, because we need a way to navigate that. And it's also probably allows us for a little bit more engagement of freelancers and that sort of thing over time, really to kind of bring in the right talent for the right jobs in the future and that sort of thing, rather than having such a big permanent team. Like, it'd be great to be able to bring in a specialist in something, open up Dropbox to them, invite them to the Asana project. They can be part of it, work it out, and live on for that project. And then they can leave after that, and it's fine. So that's sort of a big thing for me when I think about technology. That's why I'm a bit like, it's got to be easy. It's got to be simple for people to onboard, because I want to be able to do those sorts of things. I want that kind of flexibility in my operations.
I mean, imagine if the pandemic happened 10 years ago. Even 10 years ago, we didn't have these applications. We didn't have these platforms. I guess we're kind of lucky that it happened when it happened, and that everyone was so quickly, not necessarily easily, but so quickly adaptable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I know you've seen it from your clients and companies you work with. Like, some of them were really adaptive because they were quite sophisticated in terms of their digital operations.
Yeah.
The companies who were less sophisticated had a lot of challenges, right? And I think that's it's a good benchmark now to go, okay, you probably need to stay at the edge, at the cutting edge of technology, just in case, rather than put things off for 10 years because it's fine as it is now. We never know. But I think the sort of forced decentralization is a really good thing, that can only deliver benefits for workers and businesses.
I hear you. You've got so much experience to draw from. For you, what do you see as best practice when it comes to scheduling and running meetings, and how often should they happen? What should they include, do you think?
Yeah, look, I'd like to say I've mastered this, but I just definitely haven't, right? It's something that's like, I don't know, like you repeat the same mistakes over and over again. But I do think getting that meeting frequency right is actually quite challenging. And we had sort of two problems with COVID. Obviously you're worried about your team. You want them to be engaged, so you might over communicate and have more frequent meetings. But I do think team meetings daily for teams, and then I think for larger groups or groupings within those teams, maybe once or twice a week, with regular pop-ins from senior management. That's my view. That's sort of you need to be present. But you've also got to encourage those teams to be as autonomous as possible and give them, the ability to kind of run their own operation. So that's my sort of plan now, is what I've learned, I think, is to give teams more and more autonomy, and but at the same time be there for them, be involved in what they're doing, but give them trust.
And upon reflection, what was one of the more challenging problems that you recall solving in your career? You know, what was the problem, and ultimately what was your solution?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Um, well, I guess the problem seems for me like the biggest problems that I just kept seeing is like focusing too narrow on something like
Mm,
this. Like everything just becomes redundant in our industry, like whether it's a media channel or a platform or a particular kind of process or service. And that's what I sort of saw. I came into the industry when it was beginning digitization, right? And I saw a lot of people become unemployed because their skills were no longer relevant when everything was digitized. I'm
mm,
seeing the same thing again with automation, right? You know, within 20 years later, it's happening again with automation. And the same problem, you know, if you haven't worked on those skill sets and try and keep staying at the front, you do risk it. So like there's never a time, with my only view is like, don't stop learning would be my view, and you just have to keep going,
yeah,
even if it feels harder and you know things stay alienating. But you know, I'm in my mid-40s, right, and I seem to stay abreast of roughly. You know, I'm falling behind now, but you know, try and read what's happening in the world of technology and things like that, and see what's happening in marketing tech, because these things are all relevant and they work out how you position yourself going forward. You know, and also how you position your business and your teams and everything. It's always relevant. So at the
yeah,
time, it seems a little bit irrelevant, but you know, stay across it would be my view. Like you
mm,
know, there will be the next big thing. No one knows what it is yet, but you know, having some inkling of what's coming up and what might be useful to train in or you know learn about is probably that's right. I'd
yeah.
say that's the stuff that I've done well in terms of you know I've been able to respond to that.
In my experience, every 5 years, you know, that there's something that seems to come out that threatens somebody's job, but from that, there are new jobs created all of the time. So you're absolutely right. As long as you're staying ahead of that and you're upskilling, which I think a lot of people have spent this year doing, that's what's important. Do you have a particular blog or book or something that you've turned to this year that you find is a good source of information for people in your position?
I literally like jump between like you know Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. I do find those social platforms give you good bite-sized information. If you want
Yeah,
something deep in that, like it's obviously like you know LinkedIn or reporting that's coming through from you know major players in the industry, whether it's Facebook or Adobe or something like that. They do release a lot of reports, and even other agency groups do some fantastic reports on trends and changes. And it seems like you know a bit boring, right? You have to jump in your name and download the PDF, but that's you know that's kind of my you know heavy reading is that stuff,
yeah,
and the light reading is like how do I do this and this, and you know that might be on Instagram, or how do I you know basically how to stuff, right? You know
mm,
solving small challenges and then looking at the bigger picture stuff for reporting. I used to read more in terms of like sort of literature about the industry, but I just found it's so hard for them to keep up to date
it
with
is.
that stuff. So, you know, whether it's, you know, like, so it's almost like by the time the book's published and I found it, you know, it's half irrelevant. So, yeah, reports, and they come out all the time, most of them are free, and it's like, okay, this is actually great information to
Mm,
process, but it's just a matter of following the right kind of companies. But there's a stack of good companies. I could probably send you a list of, you know, my day-to-day go-to. But, and
sure.
also off industry stuff, right, as well. Like I do think it's, you know, I've always been a bit of a news junkie. So news and media, a thing I just enjoy, right? Whether no matter what the topic is, it doesn't have to be related to marketing.
Mm,
So I find that just switching around between platforms and experiences work well for me.
yeah, inspiring. But it's always awesome to spend time with you. I really, really appreciate your time today. I think having a chat to you about your tech platform has been really educational, and I really appreciate you sharing the information with us.
No worries, Vicky. Pleasure to be here.
All right, you take care, and I'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Bud. Bye.